Hey there, Mike Robbins here, coming to you live. Hope you're doing well today. What's today? Wednesday the 29th. I want to talk a bit about paradox. So I haven't come live for the last couple weeks, but if you're joining live on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, just pop a little note in the chat. Let me know how you're doing and where you're from, where you're joining. If you watch this after the fact, you can pop that in as well. I usually look at the comments. But yeah, so I was listening to a podcast episode with Brene Brown and Esther Perel. Esther is a relationship expert, a therapist, and they were talking about paradox. This was a little over a week ago, and it got me thinking. Hey, Layla, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Got me thinking a lot about paradox. Now, paradox is something that I don't talk about. I don't use that word a lot, but so much of my life and my work and kind of how I think about things is very much related to paradox. This idea that more than one thing can be true at the same time. I was on the road earlier this week, and I'm actually going on the road tomorrow. I had an event on Monday in Colorado Springs with one of our clients, Trax Retail. I did a day-long workshop with their executive leadership team, which was wonderful. And yesterday was in Los Angeles, actually in a studio, filming a keynote for one of our new clients, Workforce Software. They're having their big user conference virtually in early November, but they wanted me to film the keynote in the studio in LA and do a live Q&A, or a taped Q&A, I guess, with their CEO who lives down there. So I was there, and then I flew home, and tomorrow I fly down to Anaheim to speak at an event for an association called DBIA, which is a bunch of folks from the construction industry. And I'm having a lot of mixed feelings about being out on the road. On the one hand, super grateful and excited. Like, oh my gosh, I love speaking. It's what I've been doing for 21 years. Like, listen, as much as I love doing these social lives with you, or sitting here, or sometimes standing over there in the corner in my office and speaking virtually, this isn't my favorite. I would rather be in a room with actual humans looking at people and having real life conversations. Like, that's what I love. That's what I'm good at. That's why I started doing this, 20 plus years ago. I don't love staring at the computer and talking to the computer or my phone or iPad or whatever. So it's nice to be out in the world. It's nice to be vaccinated. It's nice that we can somehow safely or somewhat safely gather together. And I'm grateful that the world is opening up. And at the same time, it's super uncomfortable for me. I feel nervous. I feel worried, like traveling. I was standing in the airport on Sunday heading out to Colorado Springs, and I found myself feeling just like pissed off, because I love to travel. I love to be at the airport. Like, the airport, even when I'm tired, even when I'm weary, even when I've been traveling a lot, like, being at the airport has always excited me from the time I was a little kid. Some of it goes back to just growing up without much money, and we didn't travel much. So whenever I got to go to the airport, even just to pick up someone who was coming in to visit, it was always exciting. But whenever I got to go and fly, it felt like my birthday, or like Christmas morning, or something very exciting. And I still have that feeling all these years later. And I was feeling angry, like, I'm angry that I don't have that feeling at the airport right now, because it's nerve-wracking with COVID and masks and social distancing and all the things, and then just being out and then being at these events, even though most of the events that I've been at and will be at, people are vaccinated, or people have masks, or people are being, following lots of health and safety protocols, which I appreciate. There's just this paradoxical feeling of like conflict. On the one hand, excited, on the other hand, scared. And so as I was listening to Brene and Esther talk about this on their podcast, one of the things that Esther Perel said, and I've been hearing about her for the last few months a lot, and hadn't actually listened to her or checked out her work. She's got a great podcast, or a couple of them. And I'm a big fan of Brene Brown's work and both of her podcasts. But she said something simple but profound to me. She said, they were talking about it in the context of relationships. So marriages, love relationships, work relationships, friend relationships, family relationships, that oftentimes what'll happen is we get into an argument with our spouse, or we get into an argument at work. And it's like we feel sort of forced into this one side against the other side, right? Like, I think, our kids, we should buy our kids a car. The other one says, I think we should make them save up money so they buy their own car. I don't know. I'm just using that as an example. Somewhat relevant in our house because Samantha, our older daughter, is just got her learner's permit and we're trying to work through some of that. Or I think, the kids should stay home and stay away from that event because it's not safe with respect to COVID. Well, I think they should go because, and it's almost like as we, we're at work, it's like, I think we should come back into the office and work in person. No, I think we should keep working from home. And as we have these discussions, what ends up happening is we're sort of forced into these either or polarized positions. But the truth is, most of the time, we don't feel 100% one way and 0% the other. There's some combination of some paradox of, well, I see that and I see this, or there's multiple options and then we have to choose which we think is the best, weighing all the options. But it ends up, Esther said the opposite of paradox is polarization. And I mean, look at our country, look at our world right now. It's so polarized around things. I did a whole podcast on this a number of months back, but about vaccinations. Like I got vaccinated and I'm grateful to be vaccinated. And I'm grateful that the vaccines exist and that we have access to them here in the US and in other places. And I was nervous getting the vaccine. I was apprehensive. I'm grateful now. I think I made the right decision for myself. I believe the science. I believe all the experts that are saying, and like, but it's turned into this, you're either getting your vaccination or you're an anti-vaxxer. Now, look, there's clearly people that are on the far extreme of anti-vaccines or anti-lots of stuff. So again, and there's some interesting reasons why people have come to that conclusion, but there's a lot of paradox as we look at things like, do I really want to put that into my body? And can we talk about it? Or does it have to be this side or that side? And again, a lot of these really emotional issues around race, around gender, around abortion, or whatever it is. Like I have really strong feelings about these things, and they fall into one primary sort of camp of those arguments or those debates. But that doesn't mean that I can't understand or listen to or acknowledge people who look at it or think differently, or even acknowledge I have some of those thoughts sometimes. We're not 100% liberal or 100% conservative. It's just not possible. We fall on the continuum somewhere, but we live in this world where it's like you're either with us or against us. You're either on this or off. I just don't think life works that way. There's so much nuance. There's so much paradox, quite frankly. Like I love my wife, Michelle, and the pandemic has been both incredibly bonding for us and very difficult. We've been together for 21 years. And this has been one of the hardest stretches of our marriage for sure. And I feel closer to Michelle in certain ways than I ever have. This has been one of the hardest stretches for our whole family. And I feel closer to not only Michelle, but Samantha and Rosie, our daughters. And so simultaneously, there are things about COVID, as awful and painful and grief-inducing as it's been on so many levels for me and so many of us. There's parts of it that I like, that I've enjoyed personally, even though I feel kind of weird and insensitive to even say that out loud because people have died. People's lives have been completely disrupted and altered in some pretty significant and negative ways. But again, paradox is acknowledging that more than one thing can be true at the same time. Social media is paradoxical to me. I both love and hate social media. Here I am on social media right now with you on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube, wherever you're watching this, either live as I'm doing it right here in the moment, or you're watching the video this after. I love that I can do this. I love that we have the ability to communicate. I can communicate. You could be watching this anywhere in the world. I'm sitting in my office talking at my MacBook Pro with a little green light up there that I'm staring at, and you're able to watch this and we can have this conversation wherever you happen to be in the world. That's amazing. I can stay connected with and engaged with friends I had from high school and college and growing up and previous work relationships. It's amazing. I can learn things and be inspired and have access to information, and it's incredible. And it can be awful There's so much hate and negativity and nastiness and polarization right here on social media. It's a cesspool of a time suck. I can be scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn or any for hours on end and look up and go, what, wait a minute. My wife and my children are in the other room and I am staring at somebody's vacation pictures who I haven't talked to since 1993. What the hell am I doing? Or even worse than the time wasting is the comparison thing. As I scroll and look, oh, they're so much smarter and better and more attractive and have better lives. And I start ending up feeling terrible about myself. And we know not only does this do this to us, what about our children? What about the world in which we live and some of the nastiness that has come out of this hiding behind screens? And so paradoxically, social media can both be incredible and really detrimental. There are so many other things, and it's not just usually an either or. There can be multiple things happening simultaneously. We can simultaneously have made a ton of progress, which we have on so many levels, and there's still huge issues we have to deal with. Inside of organizations, it's like, how's the culture? That's what I often am working with leaders and teams on. How's the culture? Well, it depends on who you talk to. It depends on their relationship with their manager. It depends on how they relate with the work. It depends on how appreciated or valued there's so many things. Like a culture isn't one thing. It's a whole bunch of subcultures. So paradoxically, how are we doing culturally? Great. Well, our engagement scores are fantastic and people are saying wonderful things. And there's some people that are burnt out and stressed out and don't really like what's going on. So there's so many paradoxes for us in our lives, in our relationships, our families, our teams. But if we don't embrace paradox, because it can be messy and uncomfortable and there's a lot of nuance and it's challenging and it's not always clear and it goes here and there and everywhere, we end up in polarization. We end up me against you, us against them, my team against your team. And I see this to the detriment of so many teams and organizations, to so many families, to our country, to the world in which we live. If we can embrace paradox more as leaders, as human beings, as citizens, it would make a huge difference in our lives. So here's an exercise that you can do for yourself. Think of the areas in your life where there's stress or there's fear. Think of the areas in your life where you feel the most rigid about things, or the most self-righteous, the most dug in. Not that, I'm not saying give up your opinion. I'm not saying don't believe what you believe or think passionately, but where might you be able to poke some holes in some of that? Where might you be able to look at the other side or other angles of that issue? Where might you be able to understand people who see things differently than you do? More than one thing can be true at the same time. Now, facts are facts. Data is data. Numbers are numbers. There's a correct answer to a problem on a math test. There's not multiple answers. But most of life is not a math problem. Most of life exists in that gray area of we have to make decisions and do what we think is best for us, for our families, for our teams, for the people around us. And there's a ton of paradox. And when things get scary, as they have been for us in a lot of ways over the last 18 months, when things are uncertain as they are right now, we have a tendency to want to jump to certainty. We think that makes us safe. It doesn't. It just seems like it makes us safer, so we can stop thinking about it, move on to the next thing. But what we really want to do, even though it's uncomfortable and can be scary, is embrace paradox. Embrace the fact that multiple things can be true at the same time. Look at things from different angles. Understand where people are coming from. Still coming back to, it's okay for us to believe what we believe, think what we think, have the opinions we have, make the decisions that we have. But we do it from a place of conviction, not a place of self-righteousness. Self-righteousness is dangerous and damaging. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm good, you're bad. I'm superior, you're inferior. It fundamentally separates us from other human beings. It shuts off our curiosity. It stops us from growing and learning and evolving. So, embrace paradox wherever you can. Thanks for watching. Thanks for checking this out. Feel free to leave a comment or a note in the comments here. I usually look back at those after the fact, and I'll try to come on once a week. That's my intention, but sometimes it doesn't happen. So if you have ideas for other topics you want me to cover, let me know. Hey, Tracy, thanks for joining. You too, Layla. I look forward to connecting with you again here on social or through my podcast or email list or at our website, mike-robbins.com. Take care.